Hey, it's Pops, and I really want to talk to you about the toxic fandom, as the media likes to call things now, and really kind of go through a few examples that have popped up in the last little bit. And it's really been a crazy week. I know there's a lot of videos on these things I want to touch on. Obviously, we have a lot of reboots, sequels, those kinds of things. That's not new. But what is new is over the last few years, how a lot of these different things are being shaped and restructured and presented to the general public. So, for instance, Snake Eyes is now in theaters. You've seen the new He-Man show, if you want to call it that, has landed on Netflix, Space Jam. There's countless others, even the way Loki and the different shows have been handled. The one thing I think is important here is to kind of give a little bit of an overview on what's happening and why I think it's happening, and then what to expect. So first, let's just take Snake Eyes, for example. So if you've seen Snake Eyes or you're thinking about it, let me tell you, this is a horrible film. It's a horrible film. Forget about being a Snake Eyes film, because it's a horrible Snake Eyes film. But first things first, this has nothing to do with Snake Eyes. This doesn't have anything to do with the comic book lore, has nothing to do with the cartoon lore. If you're a fan of the G.I. Joe and their tradition, this is not going to be anything that should surprise you, because Henry Golding was cast as the lead as Snake Eyes. Now, Henry Golding is a fine actor. We've gotten into a really place here where Hollywood has taken the worst elements of society and culture, and they've reflected them back onto society as though we're the problem, even though they're responsible for these things. So, for instance, you'll hear them say there's not enough representation, right? So we need to hire more black directors or black writers or black actresses, or more minorities and POCs in different positions, and stars of different roles, or have roles redone and race swapped for more representation. Well, they're responsible for all this casting. I don't know about you, but I sure haven't cast any movies lately. So there's been a weird thing where Asians are allowed to be martial artists. So we're going to change Snake Eyes by having Henry Golding. Henry Golding is actually not the problem with the film. Again, this seems like Paramount sat around the room, thought about all the different things that they own, and randomly plucked out this generic action, Asian martial arts-esque action film. It is horribly edited, is horribly shot, and there's no resemblance at all to the G.I. Joe. And in fact, the G.I. Joe, Cobra, and Scarlet references that are in the film were very clearly, or easily could have been, I can't say this for sure, but could have been added after the fact. Like, we could have had this script, we're going to modify it, and here's how we roll it out. So now that fans are speaking out, it's getting downgraded and downvoted on Rotten Tomatoes and other websites. I think it made $13 million in its open. So it's been a disaster, right? But that's the fans' fault. It's we're the problem that we don't like this film, right? Same thing with He-Man. So He-Man finally drops on Netflix. Now He-Man's even a worse situation, because Kevin Smith, who basically kind of nicknamed is kind of like King of the Nerds from his View Askew days, and has this love of fandom that dates back to like the 90s, where he made these films. He was like the comic book fan nerd among us that made it into filmmaking, made money, made a career, now's a millionaire. But he's grown and become so mainstream over the last few years. He got into writing a couple of comic book runs. I really enjoyed his Daredevil and his Green Arrow runs. I've talked about Green Arrow quite a bit. But he also started doing the TV shows and all that. Well, he's also behind Netflix's He-Man. And there's been a lot of reports. He got kind of outed by Clownfish TV, talking about what kind of fan he is and not being a fan, and those kinds of things come like in the Twitter war, which, as I've talked about many times, Twitter is not real life, folks. Please stop getting sucked into that world that's full of, we know there's foreign robots and all the other nonsense. So now we fast forward, we watch the show. And it's similar to how I felt about Loki. I'm getting ready to post a full Loki breakdown again in case you missed my live stream. And it's like the bait and switch. Like, it's not a Loki show. It's a Lady Loki show, right? Loki is so irrelevant in his own show. He's actually like the sidekick. Like, it's all about her. Once she comes into play, she's presented as being the villain. Then she becomes the person that's making decisions and leading the story and the plot along. And he's just following along. Well, basically, He-Man's the same thing. It's set up as a He-Man. It's set up with all the promotional material. The trailers come out, but in there, there's these little cues and little hints. And you see the picture on screen, right? That's Tila. Yeah. And the black lady next to her is a new character named Andra. And I kid you not, the stereotype is right out of what's happened in comic books in the last 3 to 5 years, is a strong warrior female, kind of like a Xena warrior princess, which is kind of how Tila was presented most of the time, has now been made masculine. They masculinize, they masculate. I don't even know the appropriate word. A woman. A woman can't be strong or hold her own and have feminine characteristics. No, she has to look like she's on steroids. They shave half of her head, so she has this haircut, and they don't say anything. They don't address any of her sexuality, insinuate she might be a lesbian or anything like that. But obviously, that is the direction that all these different comic books and things have gone over the last few years. So why would we not see that? And then to make it worse, He-Man's eliminated right from the get-go. He-Man's not in the show past episode 1, other than a few flashback sequences where we follow Tila around and other characters, and then until the end. And it is made worse. And if you watch, oh my gosh, if you watch the after credit like production show, I should look up what it's called while I'm talking to you about this, because I couldn't believe this was legit. I thought this was like a separate show or something that somebody dug up. I didn't realize it was like the next thing when you watch this, that you can get this little clip. So Kevin Smith is there, and I believe it's the person from Mattel, and they're pumping up the show. They're bragging about the show, how great the show is going to be, and waiting for Netflix to load. Kevin Smith comes on and goes, "Can you believe that we killed Adam not once, but twice?" He's cheering this on as though it's this great thing. And everyone that is a fan of He-Man himself is like, yeah, that was the worst thing that happened on the show. And then the other individual talks about it being a love letter. That literally is within the first minute and a half of this little sequence. I was done. I checked completely out. I couldn't watch anymore. Now, I am not going to pretend that I am some massive He-Man, let alone G.I. Joe fan. I enjoyed them. They were on the afternoons. He-Man was probably a little juvenile for me at the time. I was a little bit older. It came out, I believe, in '83. It was on in the afternoons. You'd be home from school. You'd wait for the shows that would be on or different things. And I had schoolwork to do, so my siblings were there. We'd do work, whatever they'd be on. My sister ultimately become like a She-Ra nut. And then I had a cousin who was a little bit younger than us, and he got all the toys and whatever. He was really into He-Man. And G.I. Joe was really pretty cool. They're sort of like that size compatible with like the Star Wars figures, which is what I was into. But I understand the history because this stuff was on all the time. And I was so insulted with how they handled Tila, because it's not as though He-Man being cut out is the only reason to dislike the show. It's a horrible presentation of Tila. Like if you go back, and I believe it's like the second or third episode of the cartoon, Tila, if it's not the first one, it's the next one. Tila's first adventures is like she's seeking out to find out who her mom is, and it's revealed who her mom is, the sorceress. She has her mind wiped. But they have these little messages after, kind of like the G.I. Joes did, where it was like, kids, Skeletor tried to do what was wrong here. That's not how it works. Hard work is what's going to find you success, not taking the easy way. Well, hers was about, loving her adopted dad, and they're the real parent who took care of her and all that. And it was very sweet. The messages, a lot of times that come after, but that one stuck out of my mind because in contrast to this episode where, when Adam dies, Tila is a witch. She is a nasty human being. Talk about self-centered and narcissistic. She's yelling at the king and the queen who've just lost their kid. And there's all this back and forth of who knew the secret, because they say only 4 people know the secret, but immediately the queen knows the secret. So maybe I've missed some cartoons over the years and I'm not sure, but that's how they presented this show. And we're going to follow Tila around for the 4.5 episodes before Adam shows up again in heaven. And she is a horrible person. How she talks to people. She talks terrible to basically Man of War. He's treated terribly right out of the get-go as well. Similar to Loki again. I'm going to go back to the same themes, right? The men are put down. The women are raised up. The men are demasculated. I got to just stop saying that. I just can't say it right, can I? So they're humiliated, right? And women, though, are made into these ridiculous physical specimens. They can't just be women and have any feminine traits. So she's talking terrible to him. Of course, Man at Arms' name is Duncan. And she's like, you've never changed. You're still the same. I don't want to waste my time with you, kind of stuff. I don't know. It was awful. I think she calls him a broken old man at one point, and I'm just like, man, this show is off the rails. Like, I don't know what He-Man cartoon Kevin Smith and his team of writers watched, because that's not the Tila that I remember watching. I want to go back and watch a few more cartoons because I feel like I've missed something. But I don't know how you think fans are going to watch this stuff and not be outraged. Like, shame on you. Like, you're a joke. Like, you think you're going to pull this bait and switch nonsense, say, oh, go to the theaters. Come on out. We're getting past the shutdown. Come to the theaters and see Snake Eyes. See a G.I. Joe Origins. And you get there and you're like, this has nothing to do with Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes was this white, blue-eyed guy who got into an accident, sacrificing himself, so now he can't talk. He's disfigured, so his face is all covered. And that big reveal and the other Storm Shadow reveal, all that it's revealed in the trailer. Like, there's no real suspense here. Like, the best parts of everything is, if you've seen the trailer, you're good. Don't spend any money seeing this nonsense, because Snake Eyes has nothing else to do with G.I. Joe other than a couple of name drops. And then Scarlet, which Scarlet was fine. She was all right. I mean, the scenes are cardboard and replaceable. Like I said, we could have taken this script and added that in. But don't think that a G.I. Joe fan is going to show up and see Snake Eyes and go, yeah, I can't wait. All it made me do was want to go back and watch the G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra and G.I. Joe Retaliation, which are not good films. But most of the casting was not the problem. The scripts are just all over the map. Like, I just don't think they know what they're doing. Most of it is set in these weird, I don't want to go down that road, but I'm going to watch those again to feel like how do I feel about them now? But when I watched He-Man, I thought to myself, man, if I was really into He-Man, especially as a kid, or if I had those toys or action figures or whatever, I was looking forward to this, I'd be pretty ticked off, because this was terrible. This show was awful. And then to have it, we go through a whole show, we get to 5 episodes, and he gets killed again. He-Man dies again. So it's all to set up it's supposed to be like a cliffhanger to have you want more, which to me always works horrible when we're in the middle of this whole streaming era where you can watch different things and you can binge watch a whole show. It's a little frustrating to see any of that come out or happen when I have to wait. So let me get to the third example, which is Space Jam. Space Jam 2 is with LeBron James. I don't even know what the show's called. I watched it through the HBO Max stuff, and it is just an abomination. The first 30, I've actually had to stop it 3 times to get through it all. It's so bad. There's no element of the original Space Jam other than name only. Like, the 1996 Michael Jordan Space Jam is this sweet film that I remember my boys. It was like a family favorite. It was clean. It had some sports. It had some cartoon. It had some jokes. And this movie is just a mess. LeBron James stars. They're trying to pass the torch. And let me tell you right now, I'm sorry, LeBron, you're no king. All you did was manage for us to go, Michael Jordan even whooped your hind at the Hollywood transition, man. His film is 10 times better than yours. The first 30 minutes or so of being a bad parent and yelling at your kid and all, I don't know why you think any of that is going to create a story arc for your character, because your redeeming mark when you decide you're going to be a parent again is when someone else is yelling at your kid. Like, that's your humbling thing. I want to be the one to yell at my kid. I realize I'm a jerk just like that guy. That's what it took. This film wastes so much time just trying to Warner Brothers cameo stuff when they're seeking out players for their team. Like, we couldn't just do a Looney Tunes thing. We couldn't just say, these are the characters that have been down this before. We're going to bring them back. We have to go through this fake search for Iron Giant, and there's a Superman moment, and all of the stuff is there. If it's a Warner Brothers property, there's a moment. We got Game of Thrones references, and it was just so cheesy. And I'm sure there's people who are just loving it, like these Easter egg videos. I'm sure, good for you. Good for you. At the end of the day, this movie is trash. It was such garbage. If you're blaming fans for not liking this, you're doing something wrong. These films are terrible. I'm calling He-Man in there. I'm lumping it all together. These properties, how they're being handled is horrible. Shame on you. It's just an absolute mess. It's a dumpster fire of a mess. Now, so I said, I would try to explain why some of this is happening. I want to go to, basically, I want to really talk about that we've had politics infused in pretty much everything, whether that be the 2016 election, whether it be the rise of critical theory at the university levels and now into the public and private sector. Reality is, it seems like everything has to be politicized, or we have to bring that element of things into it, right? All of these different institutions. So whether it be we have to deal with race inequality, or we have to do with gender inequality, we have to deal with third wave feminism, we have to deal with all of these different things. Hollywood has overcompensated at every turn. Like at every single turn. Like if you were just an alien watching the CW, you would think that a third of the population is gay, half of the rest of the population is black. White men are not in charge of anything. Like almost every CW show has this reverse formula of reality, right? And that's pretty much what we've done with these shows. Is we took what's reality. And we say, well, you're G.I. Joe, but you're not an American soldier. You have no American background that ties you to anything of honor. You are playing a character named Snake Eyes in name, but you don't have any heroic arc. You have no positive protagonist characteristics. You're a jerk, motivated only by revenge, even to the point that in the film, there's a moment where like world calamity is at risk. If you make this decision, you're helping the enemy. It is so... the fact that the character goes through that direction for his own selfish reasons is so bad, it derails the last part of the movie when they try to fix it, right? It's just so dumb, right? In He-Man, the fact that every male has to be brought down, whether it be Man-at-Arms and He-Man himself, and that Teela is systematically going through all of these classic He-Man villains and different scenes, and then it's just the three women walking around, right? So it's Miss Teela and Andra, and then Evelyn, and they have Orko there at times or whatever. But it's just the women there, and they're complaining about men. There's a shot. I want to make sure I wrote this down, and it said they literally did the Emperor's New Groove, where you basically like Teela is almost like Rey from the new Star Wars, and then like the girls like Black Rey, because they're basically invincible. They're never really hurt of any significance. And they're walking around and they're like, oh, we're headed into certain death. Yes, most likely. I'm like, isn't that right out of Emperor's New Groove? You're quoting Emperor's New Groove now? Way to go. They start talking about men and that you shouldn't waste your time on an idiot man. They only are in it for themselves and you can't fix them. And I'm like, wait a minute. So it's a He-Man show and we're walking around and the women are just trashing men. Like that's not the positive end of show message that the cartoons had. So that's what we're having. And we're thinking that people are not going to be ticked off by this. Like in the Space Jam movie, the fact that the funniness and silliness of the Looney Tunes was so second rate to the video game appeal. Like if you're into those video games, I mean, obviously the kids are going to like some of that stuff, but there's no nostalgia. There's no like sweetness. It's the I dunked on you. Isn't it funny? There are no rules, right? So we don't have any basketball rules. Basketball rules are out the window. It's kind of joked about, but it's like at some point they have like 1,000 points and you're like, there's a channel called The Fourth Age. He does this great job in one of his videos where he's talking about heroes and villains, and he talks about a lot of this Marxist and leftist and critical theory and all that. One of the things that really struck me is he talked about how reality is the key, like what your reality is. So for Hollywood, it seems like their reality is not our reality. So instead of taking the character and having them in our reality and then moving them to be greater in a heroic thing. We bend and shape it so they're putting themselves in these situations. They're putting these political situations in there, and they don't match reality. So for us, we can't relate. We can't connect to any of these things, right? So whether you're a fan of G.I. Joe or He-Man or Space Jam, you come in it with a reality of what to expect from these franchises, from these shows, and then you get there and you're like, this isn't the reality that I know. Like, none of this is matching up. So why am I going to like it? And I'm using these as my examples today because they're new. And I'm just getting back at this because they've done this. I mean, obviously Star Wars, the sequels, and I tried to be kind. I took a lot of heat for trying to say after Last Jedi, let me just see how this wraps up. I totally could concur with some of the absurdity of how things were playing out, what they did with the classic characters, throwing away decades of canon and history and comic book and novels and all of that. Star Trek is just an abomination of what they've done. The people who are going woke, it's way worse than going woke. It's just insane what they've done. Doctor Who is, I don't know if there's a way to fix Doctor Who. I am not a Doctor Who's fan. And I knew once they did the female doctor, we were headed off a different path. But to hear now that they rewrote the entire origin of a doctor, I didn't think we were supposed to ever have an origin. I thought it was part of the appeal of the show, is you never really knew the full story. That's all out of the bag, and it's a little black girl that I guess is where it all started from. We see this with the MCU. Like, we're supposed to look at these shows, and I'm supposed to cheer for Wanda that she's a protagonist when she's basically the villain of the first series. And Vision just leaves like an impotent robot, doesn't accomplish anything of any significance. I got Black Falcon lecturing. I say that because that's what the character, one of the other kids calls him that. Claims that the racist America doesn't want him to be Cap whenever he got the shield at the end of Endgame. And by the way, notice that there was no fan outrage. None of us care. None of us care. None of us care. Stop lecturing us. But oh no, he is pro-terrorist. He can't do anything to fight the teenage girl. Lecturing people. It's just a joke. And then of course the Loki thing I've talked about. It's different when it's one thing, but it's all of it, right? Terminator Fate is another example where it just become a whole bunch of ladies. Arnold was sort of like second rate. I don't know. I just feel like there's so many franchises that Hollywood is trying to mold and manipulate down this avenue with this new form of feminism where they're not being empowered to be who they are or work back to back with a male protagonist and be heroes side by side. They have to be made into a male. Basically that's all Tila is. Tila is just a cartoon male who is being called female. She has no female characteristics. They have taken away any form to her figure. They squish her top down. They did the same thing with Lola Bunny in Space Jam. When you mentioned Space Jam, it's like, oh no, they took away her top and her hips. So she just looks like, Bugs Bunny. It's just a different, the absurdity and the extreme is where they're going. So that when we look at this, we're like, this isn't the franchise that I know. This isn't the show I know, the universe I know. Nothing matches. So why am I going to like it? Why am I going to play along? So I don't know. Maybe you think I'm crazy. Maybe I'm overthinking things in your mind, but I'm telling you, you should be concerned if you're a fan of any of these things, because I believe we're still in the beginning of this. This is just going to continue, and it's only going to get worse. So hit me up with your thoughts. You know where all the bells and whistles and buttons are for YouTube if you're watching there. Love to hear your comments and feedback as I move forward trying to come up with some new videos for you to enjoy. So thanks for your time.